So sometimes I feel like my job is that of a reporter who's reporting back to victims of abuse. Like, oh my gosh, this is Abuse Interrupted coming to you live from the scene of a healthy relationship. Let me report what I see. Um, because if you were a child victim of abuse, you probably didn't grow up in a healthy home where you got to see what a healthy relationship looks like. And then you go to school and you're often lower in set, like the kids can smell it. They know somehow, and or at least the bullies do, and then they come and they find you. So then you get older and you go out into the world and you think, I'm an adult now, I'm going to find the healthy people, it's going to be great. And then maybe you find yourself in unhealthy friendships or relationships, and you're just like, oh, you can get really tired. Anyway, so I have had the opportunity to see multiple healthy relationships just by virtue of my the life that I've lived. And one thing I see victims of abuse doing, it really a lot of people actually, so this is not just victims, is people will try to reverse engineer a healthy relationship. But because they don't know what creates the healthy relationship, they're only looking at what people are doing in the healthy relationship. And then they do the unhealthy thing of trying to turn those into rules. So then you have unhealthy people rules lawyering at each other, and then the relationship gets toxic and it's confusing because you think, well, I did all the things that the healthy people are doing, why isn't this working? So for example, let's say we have looked at a healthy relationship and it's very clear that they're communicating to each other and they're communicating to each other well. And so we go, okay, the core of a healthy relationship is communication. We have to communicate. This, if you don't communicate, you're not being healthy. I can guarantee you, this is not how healthy people do the thing. So the healthy communication is a result of how they think and orient toward each other. And that is, in my experience, what you see kind of like for everything that you see that we try to turn into a rule and then rule at each other, is basically this concept. So I should have pulled this up beforehand. One of the things that I did uniquely, I think, that I don't see other victim resources or hadn't when I came up with it, is that, everyone comes up with a list of like, these are the abusive, actions. If someone does this, they're abusive, they're abusing you. So if someone chokes you, they're abusive, they're abusing you, like that kind of thing. And it's often correct, but sometimes everybody's messy because you can't stay healthy in a relationship with an unhealthy person, right? And so victims will get to a point where they're trying to protect themselves and they may start to engage in behaviors on the spectrum of abuse but still not be the abuser, right? So it was really important to me to figure out, how do we figure out who the abuser is? And one of the rubrics I use, and I have like a couple, but I decided that instead of focusing on the actions, like the checklist of these are the abusive actions, I was more interested in, well, let me find out what the beliefs are that drive the actions. Because when you come back to the abuser and you say, hey, you're not letting me sleep, that's abusive, they may stop doing that particular piece of abuse. Then they just move on to the next one. It's like the game with the mole, the whack-a-mole, right? You whack one mole, you convince them on one thing, then they just move to the next, right? Because the thinking pattern behind it, the entitlement, the unreasonable entitlement that drives it, is what results in the behaviors that you're seeing. So the behaviors can change, but the underlying thinking is still there. And so, just as an example, I right now have 10 signs and patterns of abusive thinking, but I add on to it when I think about it. Let's see. Their feelings, their needs or wants always take priority. They feel that being right is more important than anything else. They justify their problematic or abusive actions because they're right or because they've been hurt. They engage in image management, controlling the narrative and how others see them because of how they acted in being right or hurt. They try to control, change your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, actions. They have an antagonistic relational paradigm. It's consistently them versus you versus them versus others, others versus them, even if you didn't know about it until they're angry. Their inability to see anything else from someone else's perspective, like they don't have to agree, but they should still be able to understand that person's perspective. This means they don't have a model of other people as fully realized human beings, and usually it coincides with a lack of cognitive and or effective empathy. They believe they have the right to punish you and or others and are punitive oriented versus being growth oriented, problem solving oriented, boundaries oriented, or safety oriented. Let's see. They have a blame orientation and jump to blaming others or assume people are blaming them, even when it doesn't make sense for the situation. And they assume other people have hostile or negative intentions toward them in the absence of evidence for that even being the case. They have hostile attribution bias. And so, from my perspective, those are like the ingredients for abuse to occur. So, that's what they're cooking with. The rest, the meal may be different, but the ingredients they're cooking with stay pretty consistent. And so the same thing is true for healthy people. So healthy people do the things that you see healthy people do. And then we like attempt to formalize that into a system because we think it's that system, it's the things they are doing that make them healthy. When it's more that the things they are doing are a sign that they're healthy. It's a signal of how they orient toward other people in a healthy way. And so one of the really core things that's a foundation for healthy people is honestly one that victims of abuse I find struggle with because, you know, if you're a person that has this hole inside yourself that you're trying to fill with another person, hearing the boundaries are like key to this is not a thing that we like to hear because we want to be so close with another person because we have that a hole inside of ourselves, right? So healthy people, they have very clear boundaries with each other and they respect those boundaries. They respect that other person as like an individual. Like I'm me and I'm making decisions for me. I'm very interested in what you think though, and I'm allowing that like positive influence. But I still get to make the decisions for me. And I respect you and your areas where you make decisions, and I'm very invested in having thoughts, feelings, and opinions about that. But like you make your decisions for you, and I respect that. Now I do huge caveat because victims will hear me say this, and then they think that they cannot say anything about the abuse or the abuser because it's controlling. And that is wrong. Okay. And I'll tell you how. Abusers, when they're trying to control you, they're trying to change like what you're doing, how you think, what you feel, right? Victims of abuse are often just trying to get somebody to stop doing a thing at them. And like this isn't a hard and fast rule, but I just want to be clear that when a victim is trying to protect themselves from another person and assert their own authority and autonomy over themselves, that's not being controlling. And so like an abuser, let's give an example. We'll say you're being a bad partner because you're not doing XYZ thing. And the victim may not agree with that. And so they go, well, no, I don't know. Not only do I not agree with that, but I get to make this decision for me. It gets very complicated because there are people, you know, you can see it on both sides, but I just want to say that you can protect yourself. You can say, hey, it's not okay to treat me this way. And you're not being controlling because you're saying you don't get to treat me this way. You're focusing on what you're receiving, what you get to do, and also orienting towards safety and protection. Anyway, so other things that safe people, healthy people, ways that they think, um, they are not dominance oriented. They are not dominance oriented, and in fact, they do not want to be put in a position where they're having to dominate another person. An unhealthy person may feel a sense of empowerment. Oh, I get to tell this other person what to do. A healthy person is not going to find that empowering. They're going to find it exhausting. That is a chore, right? Like, I'm busy with my stuff. I don't need to be busy with your stuff. You handle you. I will handle me, right? Um, and so you get these like different, very different ways of thinking. Both parties are not trying to make each other, and they're also very aware of like what's kind of safe and what isn't safe. And so that's why you see healthy people sort of back up from victims of abuse often, even, because they're prioritizing the safety, and it puts them in a position where therefore then they're surrounded by generally safe people. And you can be vulnerable. So, like when you get Brené Brown giving her TED Talks on vulnerability and talking about how, it's so important to be vulnerable. And it's like, Brené Brown, this only works for healthy people in healthy dynamics where you are safe to be vulnerable. That is an abundance mentality. That's not a I'm being hit mentality, right? Generally speaking. So when we're a victim of abuse, we got to recognize it's not a system. It's not a system that makes the relationship safe. It's not figuring out the rules that healthy people do to then rules lawyer at each other. And I think with the rise of kind of like therapy concepts and understanding, or abuse concepts and understanding, we're all very invested in trying to do it correctly. And what I find is that that process then itself becomes abusive depending on how people are engaging with it, and weaponizing it at each other. So really just respecting people's intrinsic dignity, humanity, accepting reality about them. So, sometimes victims of abuse can engage in magical thinking about like another person and maybe think they can save them or love them into wholeness. There's a lot of toxic thinking that often can underlie like the abuse dynamics. Obviously, that's not true for everyone. There definitely that type of abuse where you're in a happy relationship and then like maybe you have kids and then like something changed and they activated like a sleeper agent. I'm not saying that type of abuse doesn't exist, but often if you had the childhood abuse and you're coming into adulthood, you don't have that benchmark for what like a healthy relationship looks like. This is kind of like what I'm talking about. So victims of abuse will think, oh, if I can just do the perfect system, or if I can we can make perfect people everyone who understands what's healthy and is doing what is correct and healthy. Whereas I find healthy people are more like identifying safe people, because then you can be vulnerable. Then you don't have to boundaries all the time. I find that healthy people in healthy relationships, speaking of reporting from the healthy relationships, they don't have to set boundaries a lot of the time. They naturally are respecting each other's boundaries. Like the concept exists, but it's occurring organically versus this very intentional construct that they are enacting. Anyway, I hope this makes sense. I think instead of trying to figure out a system to make it work with a person who probably, as much as you are emotionally attached to them, is probably not a healthy or safe person. What the better thing to do is to get better at recognizing that you can clock the behavior, go, oh, okay, I need to step back, not a healthy person. And attaching to an unhealthy person will just make you unhealthy. It never works. Well, not never, but it often does not work the other way. You do not want to be like, oh, I hope I'm the exception. Like, But as you become more confident in yourself, as you gain competence over your emotions and your relationship approaches, you become confident that you can recognize and reorient. And that's why we're not. That's why one feature of toxic relationships is often this like unconditional kind of promise that the abuser wants you to make to them, that you can never leave the relationship. I find healthy people will 100% like, oh, I don't like this. I'm out, right? The self preservation, pretty strong. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.